Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. This is a horror movie review and we're going to go back in time to 1988 and look at Scarecrows. So Scarecrows, in case you haven't guessed by the title, was about scarecrows, although it's probably more akin to a zombie movie than anything else, to be quite honest. It was a relatively short movie, only 77 minutes I believe it is, and it really has the story of a group of criminals who are, I think, an ex-military type, and they've kind of ripped off some money, and they're kind of making their escape in a hijacked plane along with the pilot and his sort of younger daughter. And until one of their group decides he's going to double cross the rest and sort of try and steal all the money for himself, and surprisingly ejects from the plane, jumps out the plane with a parachute and steals all the money. And the rest of the kind of gang obviously follow suit, basically to try and sort of obviously kill him and reclaim the money. And of course they end up in this kind of rural area, come across a strange property with large cornfields and stuff, and have all these scarecrows. I'm not sure they're called actually, but you know, ultimately all these fields with scarecrows in. And soon strange stuff starts to happen, spooky stuff starts to happen, and of course they're attacked by ultimately scarecrows, and it turns into a kind of zombie stroke slasher film with these kind of scarecrows attacking and sort of, you know, turning people as they sort of go into the scarecrows themselves. Now, that might all sound a very sort of cliched plot, but this has some tricks up its sleeve. So let's talk about a couple of things first of all. So one of the more interesting things is the protagonists themselves are actually criminals. So that in itself is a relatively original deal. I've seen it happen a few times. You know, you've got anti-heroes and stuff, but generally these are bad people. These are people who have killed innocents. We're told that they've, in this kind of robbery, they've killed military police and things like that. And these are guys that have kidnapped someone at gunpoint and, you know, and stolen money. So that's kind of the first. They've all got their very kind of their individual characteristics. And I guess one of the sort of negative things you would say about this film perhaps is that maybe the characterization or you know, of these people isn't all that deep. So fairly cliche. You've kind of got the big guy who's a bit of a dummy. You've kind of got the tough sort of woman and everything like that. So maybe that's a kind of negative about this film. But you know, nevertheless, it's kind of an interesting cast. It's actually really, obviously you'd expect these sort of things. It's a relatively low budget. So I think what they've done with this film, for the money, it is very, very good. So here's the thing with this film. This film is one of the creepiest films I think I've ever seen. It's not a particularly gory film. It's not a particularly one that's got loads of jump scares. There is a bit of gore and there are some jump scares, but ultimately what this film absolutely has in its favour is this real sort of eerie sense and this foreboding atmosphere that sort of permeates this film, and it's absolutely fantastic. So if you kind of like your spooky films, and you can kind of get over the fact that obviously this is knocking on a bit now, because that's gonna put some people off. I mean, I've watched this film. I mean, to be fair, I only got it on VHS, but so that the quality isn't all that good. But you know, I think it's a really spooky film. But they were kind of, oh, it's old, not interested. But if you can kind of get past that, this is a fantastic, really spooky film. However, that kind of has a bit of a downside as well. This film is pretty much all set at night, so it is kind of, so obviously that goes without saying. It's dark, and that is a problem in itself. Is sometimes it's kind of a little bit difficult to kind of see what exactly is going on because it is always dark. I suppose the other problem you may have with this film is it's relatively plodding in places. Even though it's a fairly brisk 77 minutes. The actual action is a fairly slow pace. It's not really like a fast-moving horror film, even though it's a quite brisk running time. And that again is probably going to put some people off, especially if you're kind of more akin to sort of today's horror films, where they tend to be very sort of wah and slam bam, thank you ma'am type films. But if you want a really good film which has got this fantastic atmosphere in it, and they've got to say the music really helps with that, and they have these sort of lingering shots of these just sort of scarecrows that are just, you know, hanging up in the fields and what have you, not moving around and stuff, but just sort of hanging around. And you know, I think it's personally great. So loads of creepiness in this film, and it's not just the scarecrows themselves. There's also other sort of spooky stuff which is kind of not really explained, which I actually kind of like. So they go into this cabin, or this kind of like sort of old farmhouse, and it's more haunted. So you know, the lights are going on, you know, unexplained. 1 minute there's some keys on the sort of hanging up on this key lock thing, and then the next bit turn around and they're gone, things like that. So there's lots of sort of spooky stuff, and it doesn't really sort of tell you what is going on. It kind of gives you you get the idea that obviously there's these kind of, I think it's like 3 sort of hick types, and they may be into some sort of satanic rituals and stuff like that. But it never really goes into too much detail about what's actually happened there and why these guys are scarecrows and stuff like that. So it gives you some information, but not loads. But it's kind of nice just to sort of, have that sort of sense of unknowing, and that adds to the sort of foreboding atmosphere that this film has. I guess because, like I say, because these guys are criminals to start with, you can kind of maybe don't feel particularly sympathetic, but you do have the kind of like the teenage girl and her dad who are also there, who are just sort of innocent as well, but they actually don't have a huge amount of screen time, if I'm honest. But so this film, I really enjoyed it. This is actually one of my favourite horror films. If you can get past the kind of the age of it now, it's such a great film for just atmosphere, and the really, really spooky and eerie. Isn't going to be a thrill. I don't think it's a particularly good copy of this. Mine's on VHS, so I've had to watch that, which isn't fantastic, to be honest with you. But for creepy films, 8 out of 10. I love this film as a horror film. Check it out. It is a bit of a B-movie feel to it, but there you go. I mean, you've got lots of different sort of scarecrow films out there these days, and scarecrows themselves have kind of their own little sort of subgenre. And a lot of people would say probably Dark Knight the Scarecrow is probably the best at the sort of scarecrow films. I personally prefer this one. I think Dark Knight the Scarecrow has probably got a little bit more thought behind it, but for kind of creepiness and just general, horror, I prefer this one. So 8 out of 10 for me. Really, really love the film. What's your favourite scarecrow film? Leave me a comment and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.